I'm Reverend Jerry Troyer. I'm the senior minister of Joyful Living Church in San Diego, and I have just written a book titled Coming Out to Ourselves, Admitting, Accepting, and Embracing Who We Truly Are. This video is in response or follow-up to a wonderful article or posting that appeared on the blog, TheGayChristian.com, written by Brandon Wallace in early to mid-April 2013, talking about the experience of bullying coming from the pulpit. Being a minister and having a pulpit, I felt that I wanted to respond and also add to what Brandon was talking about in his blog. A lot of times, ministers will wave the Bible at us, and we never take the opportunity to go in and look at what it really says. So today I'd like to go into the Bible and show you and share with you what it really says about being gay, about life in general, so that you can decide what's true for you and what's not. So a shout out to Brandon Wallace. Thank you so much for calling this to our attention and for the opportunity to respond. Think about the concept of bullying. We hear a lot about it now, and we hear a lot about the effects of it, and oftentimes the bullying, it comes from social media. The good news is in 2013, everybody can express their opinion on Twitter, on Facebook, and we get to hear their opinion whether we like it or not, and whether it agrees with us or not, but the challenge for us is to remember it's only their opinion. The opportunity for us is to recognize that when somebody's talking, whether it's a minister, whether it's a so-called expert, whether it's a politician, they're always expressing their opinion. And we get to decide what is true for us and what is not. For those of us who grew up in traditional Christianity, even if we left years and years ago, we might still have that shame, that guilt, that feeling that somehow God doesn't love us or somehow we're less than. That was the opinion, that was the interpretation of the minister or our parents or whoever it was when we were growing up, but that's not necessarily our truth. I would suggest to you that you have no less of a connection with God, Spirit, the universe, your higher power, whatever you choose to call it, than the Pope does, than your minister does, than anybody else. What does the Bible really say? And you know that oftentimes they'll go into Leviticus and Galatians and talk about what the Bible says about this and that. But let's open the whole book and really see what the deal is. Starting in Genesis, and you might remember that a lot of the talk about Sodom and Gomorrah had to do with Sodom. And Sodom, and you know that's where the word sodomite came from, is what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, Genesis 19 verse 4, before they lay down, the men of the city, that is the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both young and old, all the people of the town, and they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them." And you may remember that in the Bible, a lot of times the word know means to have sex with. But sometimes the word know means to know, to meet. Now, logic tells us that all the men of Sodom, young and old, would not have been gay, because there wouldn't be any young men in Sodom if all the older men were gay, because, as you may recall, we don't procreate. So we look at that and recognize that that's just nonsense. That's not what God was saying related to what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's go into Leviticus, keeping in mind what was going on here. What was going on here was the children of Israel were being released from their servitude to the Egyptians. So they're trying to build a land, they're trying to build a country, they're trying to be fruitful and multiply. And so everything that God was telling them to do had to do with having children to populate the earth. If you're going to look at the Bible as the unerring facts from God, absolutely everything in the Bible is the truth and we must follow everything. You can't pick and choose. So, for example, in Leviticus chapter 11, it lists all the foods that are clean and unclean, and it says in chapter 11, verse 7, "And the swine, though it divided the hoof and is cloven-footed, yet it does not chew the cud, it is unclean to you." A swine is a pig, which is pork, which means no carnitas, no pulled pork sandwiches, because that's what it says in Leviticus. Continuing on in Leviticus 19, verse 27, "You shall not let the hair of your heads grow, neither shall you trim the corners of your beard." Verse 28, "You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor inscribe any marks upon you." So you can't trim your beard, and by the way, no tattoos. Chapter 20, "He who curses his father or mother shall surely be put to death. The man who commits adultery with another man's wife, even he who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death." And then chapter 20, verse 13, "If a man lies with a male as he lies with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination." The point of this is we have to look at when the chapter, when the book, when the verse was written and see what was going on at the time. The other thing I want to share with you is from Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. "At the end of every 7 years you shall make a release, and this is the manner of the release. Every creditor shall release any debt which his neighbor owes him. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the year of the Lord's release." Now, if I call my mortgage company and tell them that I've had this loan for 7 years, and Deuteronomy says you got to let this go, and so the house is mine free and clear, what do you think Bank of America is going to say? The point is, we have to look at the context. We have to look at the whole book, and we have to decide what's true for us. In the New Testament, you know, the first 4 books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are the words of Jesus. And he says nothing about homosexuality. He says, love your neighbor as yourself. He says, greater than these things will you do. He says, the kingdom of heaven is within you. He says nothing about homosexuality. In Galatians and Corinthians, Paul refers to the whole long list of people who are not going to heaven, and on that list there is men who lie with men. So, which is interesting, I guess. Lesbians are going to heaven, gay men are not. But if we look at that whole experience, what we recognize is he was referring to temple prostitutes, because that was a common practice as they were trying to build the Christian church. The point of this is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter unless it matters to you. If you have a feeling of guilt or shame that came from these old beliefs and these old teachings in traditional Christianity, you get to go today and look again at what's true for you and what's not. And if it's not true for you, you get to release it, because you are the expert in your life. If you're not comfortable with your relationship with spirit, life, God, the universe, whatever, if you feel the need to get back into church, I so invite you to consider finding a church that teaches what you believe. If you're in San Diego, Joyful Living Church is my church. We meet on Claremont Mesa, and we'd love to see you. If you're somewhere else, Religious Science and New Thought are wonderful teachings, and they are very inclusive. The Centers for Spiritual Living, CSL, is a wonderful group of centers and churches that would welcome you. Metropolitan Community Church has churches in most major cities, and they would welcome you as well. Look to the links below to find out more information about my church, the Centers for Spiritual Living, and Metropolitan Community Church. Ministers around the country say what they say. We get to decide if it's true for us. Remember the words of Jesus that say, love one another as you love yourself. Period. Everything else in the Old Testament was historical significance. Everything in the New Testament, with the exception of the words of Jesus, had to do with trying to build the church. I believe it's our responsibility to share that message so our young ones growing up recognize that they're not coming in with some kind of handicap, that God doesn't love them anyway, that God and life and whatever word you choose to call it loves them, period. If you go to www.revjerry.com, you'll learn more about me, you'll have the opportunity to learn more about the book, and you can sign up for my process that I call Just Say Yes. Your spiritual practice and the place where you go to be with your spiritual community is so important, and that community needs to welcome and include you and your sexual orientation. Not that that's all of who you are, but it's a big part of who you are. If it doesn't, there's the opportunity to find one that does, and I so invite you to consider that. Check out revjerry.com. Check out Brandon Wallace's blog at TheGayChristian.com.
It's all because of you. It's about who you are. Believing in our dreams. You're the heroes of our hearts. Yeah, you are. So because of you, the future looks so bright. You're my shine.